Because then we need to go into a whole different conversation of what is mixed, because we're all really mixed. And something to bring up is it's interesting that we only care if someone's mixed if they're from opposing identities. Hello beautiful people, and welcome back to my channel. My name's Kira. Subscribe if you're new, and without further ado, let's get into today's video. So today I wanted to talk about the whole biracial versus black, debate, conversation. I made a TikTok just posting part of my YouTube video that I made, I think it was last week's video, about my hair journey, just saying how like people will come up to little black girls all the time and touch their hair and tell them to straighten it. And I got a couple people telling me that I should not be identifying as black and that I am biracial, and just say biracial because when I say black, I am erasing the experiences of black women. On the one hand, I understand where they're coming from. On the other hand, it is very hard. I don't want to, come on here and complain about being biracial. I don't want to do that. However, not a lot of people are like in my position in the way that I don't really belong in either world fully. The way the world works, I tend to get pushed into the black category, which I'm fine with. But when people who are black push me out of that category, it kind of just makes me, it's just kind of like okay, where am I supposed to go? Because there's not so many of us that we can have our own thing going. You know what I mean? And I made a TikTok responding to it that I'll probably put right here. Okay, I don't know if you guys know this, but biracial isn't really considered a valid identity. It is not a box you can check. You have to pick black or white. People don't look at me and call me biracial. They call me black. My identity has never been in my hands. I always think it's so funny when people come in my comments saying, you should identify as biracial. My identity has never been in my hands, and you right there just made it very clear. People will call me black or mixed. I am never the one who gets to define how people see me. People will always see me differently depending on their experiences. A lot of light skins who are full black look like me. Sometimes I identify as mixed and biracial. Sometimes I identify as black. I think it's a both and situation. My experiences are more similar to a black woman than a white woman, and a lot of people don't recognize biracial as a valid identity. So I'm gonna go with black and biracial. If there was a space for biracial to be its own thing, the leader of the free world would have done it already. And since he didn't, and also he was referred to as the first black president of the United States by most people, not just white people, also a lot of black people, not all black people, but a lot. And that was a proud moment for Black America. And also it's weird though, because we're going back to, the one drop rule. One drop of black blood makes you black. That's, that was the rule back in slavery. And it's obviously trickled down all this time. But something that I want to bring up is that, especially when people say like, you're just as white as you are black, or like, why don't you just be proud of both sides? White, especially if you're talking about a white family that doesn't like strongly identify with the culture, right? We're not talking about like people in Europe who are in a certain country and like live those traditions, or even people in America or Canada who are, say they're Irish and they really respect those traditions and they follow them harshly, or Italian or whatever. If we're not talking about that, we're talking about the regular white culture in North America. That isn't super a culture. It's more an absence of struggle. In my eyes, a lot of times you can identify whiteness not by what it is, but rather what it isn't. Does that make sense? So it's a lack of a lot of struggle. It is a presence of privilege, but privilege is also an absence of something, if that makes sense. So I think the reason we often, when people are mixed, because then we need to go into a whole different conversation of what is mixed, because we're all really mixed. And something to bring up is it's interesting that we only care if someone's mixed if they're from opposing identities. Do you know what I mean? Because if you're mixed with, you know, Jamaican and Nigerian, people aren't usually going to come up to you and say, what are you mixed with? Or even if you're mixed with Irish and Italian, people aren't usually going to be able to easily identify you as mixed and go and ask you what you're mixed with. But when you are in the middle of two opposing identities, where there's a strong history of racism, that is when people care. That is when people come and ask you, what are you mixed with? Where are you from? What blah, 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 blah. That is when people care. So it's just, we already need to acknowledge that mixed isn't really a thing in the sense that we're all mixed. You just only care because mine is so confusing and visible. And you know that the history of it. Do you know what I'm saying? It's weird. It's getting way less weird. But when it first started, like, these mixed babies were products of rape. You know what I mean? Anomalies. Weirdos. Don't belong anywhere. If you read To Kill a Mockingbird, you know the part I'm talking about. You know what I'm saying? So our, like, story didn't start well. And it's still confusing. And we still don't really fit anywhere. But what I think is interesting is because white is often more of an absence of things, that the one that has the more, black has more weight because it has more struggle and it has more easily identifiable factors. Do you know what I mean? Especially since I've been a hip hop dancer. People are like, oh, well, you're black because you dance hip hop and you've got rhythm and blah, 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 blah. And your hair looks like this and you dress funky and you have a hip hop vibe. This part is heavier. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense. That's just how I see it. Because if you have two things and one just has so much jam-packed into it of how people view you and how people see it as, and things that people can see you do or features that they see you have and will associate with blackness. But it's just really frustrating for me when people come and try and tell me how to, because I identify as both biracial and black. Sometimes I'll say biracial, sometimes I will say black. Depends on the situation, depends on the question, whatever. It's a both and scenario. So I get frustrated when people try and tell me that I can't identify as black, because, like, on a lot of documents that ask you to check an identity, you know what I'm talking about? They'll say, are you black, white, Asian, Hispanic, whatever else, other. There is not always a biracial option. Especially when I was growing up, but still to this day, like, not all documents that ask you how you identify and what your ethnicity is will have a space that is accurate for me. So how do you expect me to identify with a space that isn't being held? Does that make sense? This space doesn't fully exist in the world yet. Biracial is not seen as a valid identity in a lot of places and to a lot of people. And also, my identity has never been in my hands whatsoever. It's always been in the eyes of the beholder. The person looks at me and says, you're black or you're barely black. And I don't really have a say. I really never have. It's all in the, because it's so contextual. That person's experience with race and people of different races and culture is going to inform how they look at me, no matter what I say. But I'm usually not the one to speak up. It's usually them telling me what I am. And that continues. That is perpetual and persistent, and I don't think that will ever leave. Whether it's people saying, yes, you are black, are you coming to this whatever black event on campus, or white people coming up to me and putting their arm beside me and saying, look, you're barely black, I'm almost as dark as you, after they go on vacation. You know what I mean? It's not up to me. So it's almost a joke for people to be like, well, why don't you identify as biracial? It's not up to me. It's never been up to me. Not one time have I felt that my identity was in my hands. A. B, until biracial is seen as a valid identity, valid enough that Barack Obama could identify with it. Valid enough that it will be on all documents as a box to check. How do you expect me to do that? How do you expect me to only identify with the identity that doesn't really exist? And what I mean by that is, like, if you think about it even community-wise, you know, there's obviously white neighborhoods. There's obviously black neighborhoods. Are there biracial neighborhoods? If so, tell me where. Do you know what I'm saying? There's not a community for me like that. So instead of us just feeling so isolated, I think it is nice and helpful for us to be able to identify as both biracial and black, because then we have a community, and then we can talk about things, and we can talk about colorism within our community. But we can't do that if you push me out. I recognize my privilege in the way that I am identifying as black and I have light skin. But there are also people who are full black who look like me, first of all. Second of all, like, there are full black people who are still light skinned. And the problem is that the light skinned women are the ones mostly portraying black women, and dark skinned women do not have enough representation. I fully agree with that. That is a discussion we can have within the black community. We don't need to push all, because to go as far as even just saying light skin, because a lot biracials look different. Genetics come out differently. I happen to be on the pretty light side. Some of my brothers and sisters are a little bit darker. Some biracial people are even darker than that. So you can't even really just push out all biracials and hope that the problem goes away, because skin color will vary. So if we're even just talking about light skins, are you just gonna push all the light skins out of the black community and then say, okay, now things will be better? I don't think that's the way. I think it's about conversation and understanding, but I don't think identity policing in this way is helpful. Personally, I don't think it is. Because I don't think it's accurate. But that is just my opinion. But personally, I think until biracial is seen as a super valid identity with a strong community, because it's also just like, there's not a lot of us. Like, there's just not. There's more and more. And you see, what's confusing too is that, I will agree, biracial is fetishized, mixed people are fetishized and often put on posters and whatever, because especially if they've got like the curly hair and like light colored eyes, like, for sure you see them. I think you see them disproportionately to how many of us exist. You know what I mean? Because I think it's fetishized, so people see that and they want them to be models or actors or whatever. So you see biracial people a lot now, but like on TV or in ads, in pictures. In real life walking around, obviously you will see us, but not as many. Because like I said, it's not an accident or a fluke, but it's two people of different races coming together, often against their parents' wishes. You know what I mean? We're just starting now to get into the time where it's becoming more accepted. And like, I'm 22. When my parents had me, it wasn't cool to do that. And I'm 22. So the generations where it's going to be super cool and their parents' relationship is super accepted, they're still young, if even born yet. You know, because it's still a stigma for sure, and everybody's still not cool with interracial relationships. So let's not kid ourselves and pretend there's a big biracial community for people to go and identify with. Because if there was, somebody would have done it already. Obama would have identified as mixed already, if there was some big biracial community that we're all supposed to be a part of. And there would always be a box to check that said biracial or multiracial. But there's not. We're not there yet. It's still not seen as super valid. People will still look at me and think whatever the heck they want to think. And that's just where we are. Yeah, I think right now biracial is a both and situation, and I think that's okay. And that's just how I've chosen to identify, and I hope that people can respect that, because I don't know what else I'm supposed to do. Yeah, so that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. If you have some insight or some comments and you want to start a discussion below, I welcome that, especially if you have similar experiences. So in general though, if you want to start a discussion or you have some insight on this topic, I would love to hear it. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you so much, and I hope you have an awesome rest of your day. Bye.